Hi, everyone, and welcome back to our final live Market Shift webinar of 2024. My name is David Labagh. I'm the Senior Manager of Marketing Communications at D&H. And if you're here today, you're here to talk all things marketing and all things market shift. And I think you're in the right place if you want to learn more specifically about social media marketing. That's going to happen in a conversation that is going to take place in just a few minutes. But before we get started, I want to introduce our speakers today. We have back again for his second time. I can't count. Ed Hidden, our Senior Manager of Marketing Solutions and Digital Media at D&H. Ed's been here for 24 years, and Ed, it's great to have you here again.
Thanks, Dave. Happy to be here.
Great. And we have a special guest today. Our guest speaker for today's conversation on social media marketing, Mr. Kyle Trovinger. He's our D&H Social Media Manager. And Kyle's been with the company for 17 years now. So collectively, between the three of the speakers on this call, we have nearly 60 years of D&H channel marketing experience. But Kyle, welcome to the party. We're excited to have you.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it.
So before we get started, because this is a D&H Market Shift webinar, we want to make sure that you know all of the new resources, all of the new campaign kits and templates that we've produced through D&H Market Shift and our marketing collateral offering. So before we go any further, I'm going to turn it over to you, Ed, to go over today's agenda. We'll see if I can actually speak today. Ed, can you go over today's agenda and get the conversation started on what we have going on in the Market Shift web portal on dnh.com?
Sure, yeah, I'll give a quick little update here. So today's conversation, like we mentioned, is going to be all about social media. We're going to be talking about establishing your social media presence and strategy for your company, and also the strategic use for each of the social media platforms and their individual value to your business. We're also going to talk about best practices for posting to social and how often, as well as responding to public comments, because they could be positive or negative, and it's important that you address all of those as they come up. We're also going to cover some tips and tools for making social media marketing easy and effective. So if you have any questions about what we might be talking about or things that you might be wondering if we're going to cover, go ahead and drop those into the Q&A widget. We'll try and answer them throughout the webinar, or we'll get to the end, we'll get to a live Q&A session. Now, if you're watching this on demand, you can ask all those questions to our Market Shift email alias. That would be marketshift@dnh.com, and we can kind of respond to those at that point too. As far as the portal, the Market Shift portal on dnh.com, we have some new resources that are available for you guys to check out. They're all kind of focused on device refresh and our AI initiatives that we have going on. We have a new one for Windows 11 device refresh campaign kit. It talks about Windows 10 end of service, Windows 11 devices, Copilot, and the new Copilot Plus PCs. We have another Windows 11 AI PC campaign kit from Dell. So those focus on the new Dell Latitude series AI PCs and Copilot Plus PCs that are available to your customers. There's an AI ebook. That's a pretty big one, and it has a campaign kit that goes along with it. That's driven to be an end client playbook that talks about the value of AI in their businesses, along with potential benefits, risks, and use case scenarios. A very valuable piece that's a little bit more in depth than what you would typically see from either like a white paper or just your campaign assets. And with it, we have some supplemental AI campaign assets that are all based upon our Success Path to AI series. We also have an AMD Ryzen Pro processors and AMD Ryzen XDNA AI engine kit as well. And then also, before we jump into our live conversation, I want to talk about, just remind everyone that we do have all of these on demand afterwards. Our last one that we did was on scrappy marketing, where you can learn to become more agile, nimble, and scrappy in your marketing by making the most of your available budget, bandwidth, and skill set. And then we had another one that's also on demand right now that's knowing your audience. And these are all available in the training and resources section of dnh.com/marketshift or dnh.ca/marketshift. So before we get into today's topic, again, if you have any questions, go ahead and reach out to marketshift@dnh.com to let us know, and we'll go ahead and we'll answer as much as we can.
Awesome. Thank you, Ed.
Yeah.
And by the way, if you do have a specific question during today's webinar, or you have a suggestion on a topic that you want us to cover in a future webinar, there's a Q&A widget in the environment that you're in right now. So go ahead and drop your comments or your questions in that Q&A widget. We're happy to answer them as we go. We may answer them as we're in the middle of our conversation, or we'll spend time in a dedicated Q&A session at the end of our conversation with Kyle. Ed, going back to a lot of the templates and campaign kits that you were talking about, there was a lot about AI, and there's always going to be a lot about AI. In fact, we'll probably touch on AI a little bit in today's conversation on social media. But with all of the amounts of AI in the world, I think it's good to let everybody know that there is no amount of AI that could fix the way that your eyes look right now, or fix the way my throat feels right now. Ed and I are both a little bit sick, so we're going to fight through this to the best of our ability today. But I wish that there was AI to fix this for us. Luckily, Kyle has no ailments that are preventing him from presenting today, so he's going to be our all-star speaker. And speaking of Kyle, it's your turn. It's time to introduce you as our social media expert today. We're really excited to have you here. So you are the D&H social media manager. But before we get into the conversation about marketing through social media, why don't you tell us about yourself a little bit?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. So on the personal side, I've got 2 kids, 2 boys. One's 12 and one's 9. They keep my wife and I very, very busy. They're very active in sports, and I'm also active in terms of coaching their respective sports. So every season I'm coaching at least one, and oftentimes to my wife's dismay, I'm coaching multiple teams in a given season. But on a professional side, as you mentioned earlier, I started at D&H about 17 years ago, actually as a graphic designer. And then as my career progressed, I started to add more responsibilities on the digital team and marketing communications. And about 10 years ago, social media was starting to become a little bit more prevalent. And I recognized our D&H's lack of presence. So I started to bug my boss that we should bring that in-house within the marketing team. At that time, HR was basically running recruitment through our LinkedIn accounts, and sales had set up a Facebook and Twitter account, but we weren't actually posting. They were kind of just squatter accounts. So I just kept bugging, and eventually was able to get the keys to the accounts and started to overhaul our pages and posted semi-regularly. And then after about a year of that, instead of it being a part-time gig for me, about the past 9 years, it's been my primary role.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think it's really important to note to our audience today, some of our audience who may be just getting into social media for their business. Kyle, you're a story of starting from the bottom, and now you're here, where you made things happen from the very beginning with our social media presence, and it took work, but you were willing to put in the work, and there was a lot of experimenting that went along with that, and we're going to touch on that today. So Kyle, when you're thinking about developing a social media strategy and trying to get a presence for your business out there on social platforms, what's the first step? What do you need to do first? How do you simplify this, and where do you start?
So first of all, just recognizing that you should be on social is a great first step. And if you're just starting out, don't try to be everywhere all at once. You should consider your customer base. You're going to want to meet them where they are. For D&H, we find that LinkedIn and Facebook is where most of our partners are. Facebook is by far the most popular platform in the US and globally. So I definitely suggest starting there. You probably have a lot of friends, family, colleagues, employees who are using Facebook, and that's who you kind of want to use to start your follower base. Reach out to them, invite them to like and follow your page.
Yeah. Okay. And so we're talking about the company pages here, right? And if we're talking about company pages with this, what's the difference? How does your personal social profile, your personal handle, where does that fit into the overall social media marketing strategy?
Yeah, that's a good question, Dave. So I've seen a lot of companies, people who can combine their personal pages and their company pages into one account. Often it's a personal page that they've just made their name their company page. I suggest not making that mistake, because regardless of which platform you're going to use, there are tools for business pages, for the company pages, that are unique and not available for the personal profiles. So you're going to give up on a lot of tools and customization from that standpoint. Um, that said, it is important to keep your personal LinkedIn profile up to date, especially the smaller the business, the more your personal and your business brands are aligned. So make sure you're updating your profile to include all of your recent certifications and proficiencies as you add them. And then another consideration is whether or not, um, if you're an employer, do you want to include, do you want to allow your employees to identify themselves as employees of your company? Because inevitably, if they've identified themselves as employees of your company, their actions are going to reflect on your brand. So what goes on online, it's going to be connected to your brand. So that's something that you should consider, whether or not you want your employees to have your business in their personal profiles.
Okay, yeah, and that's a really good point. So, and when we're talking about branding here, branding isn't just the logo. So, I think that it's worth mentioning that to this audience. Branding's never about a logo. Branding goes down to the individuals that are part of your business and including yourself. So the brand extends beyond that logo and beyond that visual representation that you have for your business. Okay, so Kyle, when we're looking at how you brand yourself differently versus how you brand a company on social media, what are the differences? So if we were to start with you specifically, how do you brand yourself as a D&H employee co-owner versus how you brand D&H as a company managing their social media accounts?
Right. So for a lot of people, social media and personal branding doesn't come naturally. I've offered what we were calling social media audits to some of our employee co-owners to try to help them refine their personal brand. And when I do that, when I advise our co-owners, I encourage everyone to look their best online. When the employees look good, the company looks good, and it shows that the organization is comprised of talented professionals, and that builds trust. Trust is something that you'll hear me mention several times, I'm sure, throughout this conversation. But along those lines, going back to the certifications and proficiencies, it's important to go through your LinkedIn profile, I would say twice a year or so, to make sure that it's updated. Some people, they may be 2 promotions, further in their career, but they haven't updated their profiles. So make sure that all of your roles and responsibilities are updated. When people go to view your personal profile, they're getting the most accurate representation of you. And again, it's going to create more trust in the individuals, and that's going to create more trust in the company, especially if you're an owner of a small business.
Yeah, that's very true. And Kyle, I'll admit, like personally, I'm terrible at keeping my social media profiles up to date. It's a good thing I'm not necessarily in a market-facing role or in a customer-facing role all the time, and I kind of work in the background, except for these webinars, of course. But I've got to say, it doesn't come naturally to me to brand myself on social media. It actually feels a little bit awkward. Now, I know that you're going to have some tips and tricks for that a little bit later, and Ed, we're going to pull you into the conversation shortly. And I think where my discomfort comes into play here is that I feel like if I'm on social media, particularly LinkedIn, I feel like I have to act like a personality or some kind of influencer, and that's how you garner the legitimacy or that professional look and feel. So for an individual who's representing their company on LinkedIn, is that a requirement? Like, do you need to act as an influencer in the channel, in the market, in your social platforms? Is that something that you should be looking to do?
No, not necessarily. And I think for many people, when they think of a social media influencer, it's kind of
It's awkward.
So
Not everybody wants to be an influencer, right?
no, it always conjures up thoughts of TikTok dances and stuff like that. But no, definitely not. You really just want to be an advocate for your company and showcase your own professional expertise. If you decide to repost something from the company page, that you have an option to just like repost as is without adding your comments or thoughts, or you can go ahead and add, you know, a little bit more context to that post. I would always suggest that you add something, because your connections, the people who follow you or are connected with you online, they are so much more interested in what you have to say than what the corporate version has to say. Mm-hmm. So, and you don't have to go overboard. Just be natural about it. Tell them what you liked about whatever the post was, or you can use it as a chance to reinforce some of the core values that your brand has.
Yeah. Okay. And a question for the audience right now. We don't have a formal poll question, but drop it in the Q&A widget if you'd like. I kind of want to know, how many of you consider yourselves active on social media? And by active, let's define it as one post per month. Do you see yourself as an active participant on social media? And let us know how you participate on social today, whether that's Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, well, X, or any other platforms out there. I'm curious to see what our audience says. So before we move back into the company profile and branding the company, Ed, I want to pull you back into this conversation now. So Ed, I think that it's good to share with the group here that you are probably one of our more well-rounded social media users out of the three of us. And by that, I mean that you've been active on social in a number of ways for many, many years. And you've actually branded yourself through your own personal website, through your own hobbies, and through a couple of fun ventures that you have. And in fact, you call it Ed Ventures. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do there personally, and then describe how what you do personally needs to or is sometimes different than what you would do when you're representing D&H.
Sure. Yeah. Actually, I love to tell people when they ask how long I've been on social media. It's like I was on Twitter when it was originally an SMS service that went through your text messaging, and it wasn't even on the internet at all. So I've kind of followed a lot of this technology, and it's always been very interesting. I'm a social person by nature. I have a large friend network of stuff, and it just kind of has tailored itself really well to social media. It just kind of fits right along with the way that my extrovert self that I am. And you mentioned Ed Ventures, but yeah, so that was, as I was getting into trying to figure out how my brand was going to be online. I have a lot of interests, whether it's mountain biking, road biking. For a while, it was Frisbee golf. It was craft beer making. It was a lot of these different things that interest me. And I wanted to participate in those different communities that were out there. But I also didn't want to go and create different accounts for each one of those different nuanced things that, I was dabbling in, especially because they change so often, and one comes to the foreground and one goes to the background. Everything kind of seemed a little bit like an adventure. So the play on words for adventure kind of kicked in, and it was a really good brand for me to kind of wrap myself around. And my friends and my followers do tend to know that that's where, they know that I'm going to be ADHD. They know that my attention is going to be split. I'm going to be posting one week about photography. The next week it's mountain biking. The next week I've even posted about hacky sack or something, silly like that. So it is good because I've established a brand that shows that I have a lot of different interests, and surprisingly, all of those interests do resonate with people, and I get questions every now and then. So, and sometimes they're D&H related, other times they are, they're not D&H related, or they're tangentially related. So when it comes to our D&H content, I don't tend to share a lot of the posts that the company puts out there. Occasionally, I'll share something that our marketing or creative team has done, because one of those personas that I've built into Adventures is kind of like that marketing, creative, professional sort of stuff. So I don't talk about the technical side of selling PCs or things like that. Although I do get questions from my followers because they know that this is what I do. So it does still provide some sort of value to my audience. But like where our sales reps, they have connections with a lot of our resellers that they serve. So they're more likely to share some of those D&H posts that are going to be more pertinent to their business. And that's the big thing is making sure that when you're talking about something, you want to be talking about the things that the people are following you want to listen to. So that's kind of like the big overarching thing I would say when you're sharing personally is, make sure that it's relevant, if I'm talking about mountain bikes one week and then I throw in something about, an AI PC, someone's going to go, where did this come from?
That's true. But I think that there is a balance that you can have between personal and professional crossover with your profiles. And Kyle, maybe we can have you speak to that a little bit, because at the end of the day, social is selling, marketing is selling, and you develop relationships with your customers. And if part of that relationship is that friendly banter and talking about what you did on the weekend, or talking about the mountain bike ride that you just did, and maybe you find out that your customer also likes to ride bikes, that's a way to connect, and that's a way to sell. So there is that fine line, that fine balance that you can discover and then implement between personal and professional posting. In fact, somebody that's really good at that is somebody that we've brought in as a keynote speaker in the past. His name's Jay Baer. Jay is a marketing consultant and keynote speaker, but he also really loves tequila. And so Jay does tequila reviews and tastings in addition to everything that he does professionally. And so you might be able to find that niche or find that unique thing that, while it's personal, it also helps to differentiate you as an individual and kind of as a business too. So, and also I can vouch for what Ed said about Ed knowing a lot of people. Ed knows somebody everywhere. I swear, we will travel around for work events or just for fun events, and he'll meet somebody in some random corner of the world from years and years ago, and he'll be like, "Oh, hey, Dave, here's this person. Why don't you meet them? I knew them back 20 years ago, and we did this, this, and this." 3 degrees of Ed hidden. He knows everybody everywhere. So anyway, Kyle, back to you. So now we're going to get back into the branding of the company pages. So we've talked a little bit about where to start. We've talked about the personal brand versus the business brand. But what advice would you give to partners when they're starting to build their brand on a company page? So we're no longer talking about the personal page and advocating for the company, but if you're starting from scratch today to build a company page, where do you start?
I think you want to view your social media pages, your business pages. They're basically your digital business card. So you want to have a very concise but accurate summary of the products and services that you provide. You're going to want to have your contact info, ways for them to reach you. If you're just starting out with social, I think it's really important to make it clear that you're experienced. I'm going to go back to trust again, that you've earned the trust of your current clients and developed a good, solid customer base. So client testimonials are a big deal. If you haven't been collecting them for your marketing efforts, that's something that I strongly recommend you begin doing. Sometimes you don't necessarily have to even ask your clients for them. If they send you a note, if they send you an email of appreciation or a note about one of your technicians who did a great job on an install, you can just kind of pocket that and ask them if they would mind if you would use that for some of your marketing efforts. And most times it's going to be a quick okay, and you don't have to identify them. It could just be something like a dentist, just say it's dentist office in your town or whatever. But those kinds of client testimonials are a huge deal. Anything that you can do to show customer satisfaction, like a before and after pic. If you've gone, I've seen plenty of VARs and MSPs, throw up a picture of a before and after of a server closet that looked like a nightmare, of a rat's nest, and then they came in and tidied it all up. clean installs of like security cameras around the building. Just kind of, you're just reinforcing that you're convincing the prospects that you've got the right solutions and that you're the right provider for them.
Yeah, and I love the point about the client testimonials too, Kyle. Word of mouth is still probably the most powerful marketing that you can get today. Whether it's on social media and not necessarily influencers on social media, it's just word of mouth, friend to friend, person to person, saying, hey, I trust this business. These guys were great to work with. You should use them because I vouch for their character, their ability to help and support. So yeah, that's a really great point. And I think it's a good time to also address some of the feedback that we've gotten in the Q&A chat. So we asked who was active on LinkedIn, and we saw a couple of people. It was kind of a mix of LinkedIn and then Facebook and Instagram, and that they're really only posting every few weeks. And that was the majority of the answers here. But it looks like Barry asked the question, what does active on social media mean? Does that mean posting original content on LinkedIn versus responding to someone else's post? And then similar for the activity on Facebook. So Kyle or Ed, do you want to speak to that a little bit? Like, how would you define active on social media? Do you have to be that thought leader, or do you just have to be an active participant?
Ed, I can start.
Yeah, sure.
I think being active from when you're considering your personal profile, you don't have to generate a lot of original content. You can absolutely be active by commenting on other people's posts. The key is you're engaging, you're communicating, you're being seen. Colleagues are you're reminding people of yourself. So definitely, you don't have to create a whole lot of original content as an individual. You can definitely just engage with other people's posts, but the key is you're still having those conversations and you're still communicating with people in your industry. As far as the pages, I would definitely define activity as original content. That's where that becomes a lot more important. It's still also important to engage with comments or respond to mentions and things like that. But in terms of activity for a company page, that's going to be reliant on the amount of content that you're actually creating and publishing.
Yeah. Ed, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I do actually. I think Kyle nailed it right on the head with a lot of the stuff. The big thing I would say is, social media is about getting to know that person. So it's important to make sure that you're sharing those thoughts, whether it's just in commenting on other people's posts, which is helpful, or in participating in a group or a community or somewhere there's a conversation that's fostered. It's all about getting people to know who you are and just kind of like raising that hand and saying, oh, I have my thoughts on this. And when it goes to that original content, maybe if you're sharing a lot of content that you've seen on publications or manufacturer websites or things that are important or valuable to your customers, I would probably say it's best to not just hit that share button and post, but add 1 to 2 sentences even is enough to just kind of like add your thoughts to that conversation that helps people understand why you think it's important to invest the time in this article, video, or check out a website or something like that. So it's all part of that. It doesn't have to be long drawn, thought out, blog articles or a vlog or something really in depth that you've done. Like Kyle mentioned, those, the tidying up a server cabinet, something you've already done for somebody. Those things can be easily be turned around as a quick, short example of your expertise.
Yeah, and so for context, everyone, I'm not as active on social media as these two are. I've already stated that I feel uncomfortable kind of tooting my own horn a little bit out there and getting out there on social media. And it's because of posts that I'm looking at right now. So I pulled up my LinkedIn profile, and Barry, I know that you might be referring to the content that you see on LinkedIn where there's a little intro and it's like a cliffhanger, and then you've got to click down to see this long story or this long narrative about how these people got to where they were, or this project they worked on, or that has some big lesson behind it. Being active on social media doesn't mean that you need to have that kind of brand established. We've already talked about, we don't need to be influencers. You don't need to be an influencer, but you need to be an advocate for your business, and you need to be a good representative of your business for your customers, for your clients. So I couldn't imagine the time that it would take for me to put in to crafting a post like some of these that I'm looking at without the assistance of AI. And even that point, it really wouldn't sound like me or even human at all. But yeah, it's not always necessary to overbrand yourself like that. So, all right. So back to the social media conversation where we were going and talking about the company profile now. So now let's get into the different platforms. So Kyle, you've already established that we are on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and X. So we're all over the place.
And Reddit, we added Reddit.
And Reddit, gosh, we're everywhere. I'm sure there's some other obscure network that you have us on too. So how did you decide what social networks to get us into and what were the best for our business to use? And then when we're talking about which ones that we were getting into, was there a reason behind it? And were there best practices behind using each one of those networks? I'm really interested for you to go into this because I think we've kind of touched on it earlier, where Facebook is more personal, LinkedIn is more business, Twitter is, or X, it's something now. I'm gonna let you take it from here and just kind of give us some context on the different platforms.
Well, as I said earlier, some of them I inherited, but over time it became clear that LinkedIn and Facebook they were the in our wheelhouse, if you will, in terms of engagement. LinkedIn, we have an opportunity to have conversations with customers, vendor partners, employees, even and colleagues from, even competitors. It really, the IT channel is just one big ecosystem. So LinkedIn, as far as it being the professional network, that definitely holds true. Facebook, people get on Facebook to be entertained, right? So that's where I find a lot of our culture posts where people are receiving accolades, or we had some kind of fun event at D&H. I find Facebook, those things really resonate with friends and family of our co-owners and co-owners alike. And I think even customers and vendor partners we see, people enjoy seeing other people happy. So, it's just Facebook, again, it's the by far the most popular platform. So I would encourage our partners to start there. It's the easiest one to start to break into. But again, don't ever do it by trying to be everywhere at once. We have a bigger team, than most of our partners would be able to have for in terms of a marketing department. So, I mentioned that we just kind of added Reddit. That it reinforces what I was trying to say earlier, where you want to be where your customers are. So I happened to be doing trying to do some social listening, and I saw that there were some conversations where we were being recommended. So I wanted to be able to engage with those people, thank them for the recommendation, because that's, D&H is a big company, but word of mouth is so important. So I wanted to go in there and reinforce, have a little personal touch, and make sure that people who were recommending D&H versus our competitors, I wanted them to know that we were appreciative of that's not something that we take for granted. So I went in and created a Reddit account, but every account you create, it needs to be active. So don't dive in too much at once, because if they're dormant, it kind of looks, as bad as if you're not even on there, so to speak. So just be careful about trying to get too deep right away. But generally speaking, I think a simple strategy for most people, if they're starting out and trying to establish it's if you already have a company page, clean it up. Same with your personal profile, like on LinkedIn, and then create a page if you don't have one for Facebook. The really nice thing about Facebook, they of course, Meta also owns Instagram. So they have an inherent tool. It's called Meta Business Suite, and it'll allow you to cross post. So right there, you're basically getting a 2-for-1 deal, and that really makes it a lot easier to take care of all from one little tool.
Yeah, I love how you said. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, I was just going to say real quickly before you jump into the next one, Dave, I wanted to mention, I don't know that we've really covered this, but I know we've said about creating a company page, and it's probably important for people to realize that in a lot of these platforms like LinkedIn, Facebook, and I think Instagram might have them as well, maybe not Instagram, but they have a separate section called pages, which is separate than profiles and accounts. So it's important to recognize that when we say go ahead and create a company page, we're not saying go ahead and log in with a whole new setup. It's actually a set of tools that are within both of those platforms. So just kind of wanted to reiterate that for a lot of people in case there was any confusion on that.
Yeah, that's a good point. And Kyle, back to what you said earlier, we don't need to be on all of the platforms all at once. So if our partners are starting today, starting with LinkedIn could be the place to get, the place to go first. Just starting on Facebook only would be the place to go first, and then build it from there, learn and build it from there. You don't have to do everything all at once. You don't have to try to boil the ocean all at once. Starting at a very basic level and then growing from there is a great strategy to go about things. In fact, even the comment that you had about meeting your audience where they are. We talked about this a little bit in our previous webinar about knowing your audience. So if you haven't watched that webinar, for those of you in the audience, I'd encourage you to go back and watch that webinar about knowing your audience. And we do go into understanding who they are, understanding how they engage and where they engage. And then that might help you to establish what your social media strategy could be up front when you create your company profiles, or when you're starting to really get strategic with how you're going about posting on those company profiles. So I think that's really important to reinforce here. Another thing that's really important when you're coming up with a social media strategy is making sure that you define clear goals for your strategy and for your social accounts. So, Kyle, when we were getting active on social media as a business, what were our goals? How were we defining success, or how were we able to define if we were finding any success on social media at all?
So early on, I had two pretty basic goals. The first one, when I essentially was starting some of these pages from scratch. So I wanted to establish a presence and make sure that we could be easily found on social media. There's some evergreen content on your company page. You have a header section and an about section, things like that. I wanted to make sure that those were a reflection of our brand, and that that we had accurate contact information. Again, it's kind of your digital business card. If you don't use social a lot in your everyday life, it may seem like an unconventional method of contacting a business. But for a lot of people, it's perfectly normal. And in fact, some prefer that method, So
and Kyle, I think it's worth giving examples here too, that like you have a lot of people, a lot of our partners that may end up contacting you via social media for a number of reasons, but that could be something as simple as maybe they're an account that hadn't done business with us in a long time, and they're looking to get in touch with anybody, so they can get started again. So it's really good for partner activation at that point.
It really is, yeah, and it runs the gamut, right? Like some people, they use it as a way to check back in, like you said, to kind of find a new contact. Maybe they're when they had an active account, their rep's no longer there, and they're looking for someone to reach out to. Sometimes we were contacted about to get tracking numbers. It's just another opportunity to provide customer service, right? So yeah. I take that component very seriously. I'm not a salesperson by any stretch, but what I want them to know is I care, and I'm going to do what I can to help them get whatever their situation is resolved as fast as possible. So I'm often a conduit between myself in logistics or sales or the onboarding team. But again, it's just another way for your customers or potential customers to reach out to you. And then just to wrap up there, the second goal is really simple, and it was just to increase our activity and the frequency of how often we were posting. That was the only way to make our pages relevant is to be creating content and posting.
Yeah, that's a good point. And we're going to get into frequency next, but before we jump into frequency, I am curious. For those of our attendees in this webinar right now, for those of you who are, say you consider yourselves active, you have the business page or profile up on LinkedIn or Facebook, or on X or somewhere else. How are your end customers contacting you? How are they engaging with you on social? Do me a favor and drop it in the chat. We'd love to hear what you're experiencing and how you're engaging with your partners, just based on what Kyle was talking about with the different goals that we had and becoming, very customer service focused there, and just adding more content. I'd be interested to hear how your end clients are then engaging with you. So go ahead and drop that in the Q&A widget. And so now we're going to talk about frequency, Kyle. And I think we're going to bring Ed into this a little bit too, because Ed, I think it'll be good to have your perspective from an individual contributor and an employee perspective, somebody who is doing more personal posting than business posting. But Kyle, we're going to start with you first. So when it comes to being active on social media, how active do you need to be on each one of those main platforms?
Well, if you're not posting presently, then any amount of posting is going to be a huge improvement, right? But again, don't be overwhelmed by this. I know it's, you're adding another responsibility to an already busy schedule, but the last thing you want to do is make it so overwhelming that you decide to abandon it. So. Mm-hmm. Once you've established your pages and gotten them up and running, again, you've invited what's going to be your core followers. You've got your employees, colleagues, friends, and family. Then just set a realistic goal and make sure you stick to it. So you just want to be consistent. I suggest adding it to your Outlook calendar or your Google calendar. Create a reminder. It's all, create a recurring meeting. Carve out time, whether it's weekly or monthly, because you can kind of create posts and schedule them. And I think we're planning on talking about that a little bit later. Mm-hmm. But for beginners, if you are posting once a week, maybe bi-weekly, that's solid. But the important thing is you have to stick to that cadence. So if it's going to be bi-weekly, that's still 26 times a year, right? So that'll give you an opportunity to start to test out what type of content resonates with your followers. Could be photos, videos. Again, we talked about testimonials. And then you can try out different times. Do you post around the lunch hour? Do you try to get people in the evening when they're relaxing and maybe, scrolling through their feeds? It's really a process of trial and error. It's a wild ride. I mean, it's both an art and a science, and what works for some people won't work for others in different industries, and even within the industry, who knows? But once you start you're only going to start to recognize those patterns if you are active. So don't be discouraged if your followership doesn't take off right away. Social media is really about playing the long game. Mm-hmm. And I do have a little, I guess this is a hyperbole, but maybe some people can relate to this. In many ways, I see social media like I do with golf. For someone like myself who doesn't do it very often, it can be really frustrating, especially when you're first starting out. Shots are incredibly unpredictable. You feel like you're not making progress, but then every now and then you drill one down the fairway, or you land a butte, and you're putting for birdie. Those are the kinds of things that bring you back, right? Those are huge wins, and the more you play the game, the better you get at it. So on social, I think if you land a good review, or we've all seen this, right? The in search of. If someone mentions your business in a in search of, because they're looking for a technology provider or someone who can handle their, they don't have an in-house team and they're looking for an IT pro that they can rely on. When you get mentioned or tagged in posts like that, those are the kinds of wins that you're looking for, and that those are reminders of why you're putting in this effort to be on social media.
Yeah, I love the golf analogy for somebody who golfs occasionally.
Dude, we've golfed together. You've seen my game.
Oh gosh, well, both of us. But when you hit that good drive, it makes you coming back. So Ed, over to you from a personal perspective. Do you have any additional advice, or do you have a differing perspective when it comes to personal posting versus business posting, to go along with what Kyle was sharing?
Yeah, no, I actually kind of want to just more echo what Kyle was saying. I know I originally talked about, for beginners, making a post once a week is a good guideline. I would also probably suggest to shy away from the inverse of that. I've heard some platforms can penalize your stuff being shown to new followers if it's being too much content. If you're being very, very rabid about trying to get out and get that followership built and push as much out as quickly as possible, it probably benefits you a lot better to keep all of that into kind of like a calendar or a task list, and kind of divvy that stuff out in the way that you think of it as another person, really. It's like if you were in a room and you were trying to get people's attention and share with them, and you were just talking about everything all at once, people are going to tune you out, and they're not going to be able to hear you. And the algorithms do kind of do things like that. So focus on the conversation you'd like to have in the cadence that you'd like to have it, and kind of stick with that. The cadence, I think, that Kyle mentioned is probably the big thing to mention there. And there's all these, if you get into one platform that you prefer over another one, and you find that you want to build that followership, I would say, go on YouTube and look for build your followership on whichever platform that you're talking about, and just become a little bit more educated on the nuances of each platform and the things that you can do to bring a little more attention to what you're working on.
Yeah, and I'm going to mention this too, but then we're going to move quickly on to this next topic. Just posting too often can penalize you, but engaging with others' posts can help you. And so keep that in mind, that you don't always need to be producing your own content like Kyle shared before. If you go and you comment on other posts, or you go and act as a customer service representative or that advocate somewhere else, that helps your posts to get more exposure. So we won't dig into that, because I want to get to this next topic and have enough time for some discussion at the end, which, by the way, if you do have questions that you'd like us to address, drop in the Q&A widget. We'll work that into our conversation. We've got about 12 minutes left, and so we can take some time to answer your questions, and even stay a little bit over time after 3 o'clock if you do have some questions that you'd like us to address. On to this next bullet point that we have here, guys. This is actually something that was a big concern for us when we first got into social media. And that was the potential for negative comments about the business. It's scary. You don't want your business to look bad to the outside world, to those who could be coming to you and looking to you as an expert. You want to look clean and polished and like you know what you're doing. But you often can't get around somebody who had a poor experience for one reason or the other. So let's talk about handling messages and comments, particularly those negative comments about the business. And Kyle, do you have any best practices for handling comments that you get or tags that you get on social media where somebody may not be happy with the service level they received?
Yeah, and before I jump into crisis management, I did want to touch on a broader rule of thumb and kind of just expand on what Ed was just saying there. you really want to respond to every comment that's made on your page, good, bad, or indifferent. Even if it's just with a like. The only way to grow an engaged follower community is to truly engage yourself. And that might sound obvious, but if your followers know that their comments are going to be read and that you'll respond, they're a lot more likely to continue to comment in the future. And comments are actually favored by the platform's algorithms more than even reposting. So that'll get your content into more feeds, and that's how you grow your followers. So it's kind of like one thing leads to the next. For positive messages, I would say make sure you show appreciation. Try to come across as humble, grateful that they took the time to make a comment and give you a positive feedback. Whenever you can, shift the focus to your employees. You serve the customer. Thank the customer for trusting your business to get the job done right. And then, of course, negative comments or messages, they're going to happen. Don't get defensive. I know that, you might see this as you're being attacked and your livelihood's on the line. Don't get into a back and forth. Treat it as a customer service situation that's in the public eye. You're going to want to act with care and empathy and acknowledge their concern, and then try to redirect it to an email or a direct message on that platform so you can address things privately. And then, and it's not just to you don't necessarily just want to shove it under the rug, so to speak, but there could be sensitive information that could be shared. And for your respect, out of respect for their privacy and the privacy of your company, try to get them into a more private form of messaging, and really just view this as an opportunity to show potential customers that you're responsive and that you're going to make efforts to improve undesirable experiences. You don't have to admit guilt, so to speak. Addressing those difficult messages is not an admission of guilt. But you do want to acknowledge that they're upset. And if someone stumbles upon, a negative comment down the road, that person who might be a prospective customer is going to see that you take customer feedback seriously, and you're going to work to address it. And I think, again, you're kind of converting a negative situation into a potentially positive one.
Yeah, I think that, people kind of look at this as like, companies are a lot like people and nobody's perfect. So it's always good when, a company acknowledges that something didn't go the way it was intended to go and actually listens to that feedback to try and improve it. That's really what, social media marketing and response is for me. When I see a lot of it, it makes companies look more human, makes them easier to understand, and it makes the company look good, because people are made of companies, or companies are made of people. So people are going to, do what people are going to do. So it's important to, be courteous and recognize that and move on.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, I've seen the stories about, somebody had a pizza delivered to their house, and the pizza was totally smashed, and it just arrived in a manner that was really not acceptable for somebody to open a box and see it that way. And they post on social media, really disappointed with their experience. But the companies that are reaching out and saying, oh, we're really sorry that happened. I'll tell you what, our next pie's on you. That goes a long way, because it shows the resolution in a positive way. It shows the quality of the business that you're working with, and you can get new business and new customers and just establish that trust out of an interaction like that. So, okay, we're on to our last two areas here. So, social content best practices. I think everyone's probably thinking, great. We know we have our pages. We know we need to be active. We know we need to establish trust. But what the heck are we posting about? What are we supposed to post about on social media from a company perspective and a personal perspective? So, Kyle, what do we do? What are the best practices? Make this easy for us here.
Well, I think there's going to be a temptation to kind of hit people with a hard sell, right? Because ultimately we want to find a way to make these marketing efforts lead to sales. But this is, again, it's a long game. So try to offer some value to current customers or potential customers in the form of either education or entertainment. If you have a complimentary workshop or webinar coming up, maybe there's a useful article that you found somewhere, you can share that and add a little bit of your own thoughts again. Or maybe there's a funny or relatable meme that you found about, relatable IT pain points. You're just really trying to showcase the value of your business, and you're trying to make a connection with people.
Yeah. And I love the meme idea, and I think memes are very relatable on so many different levels. So as a marketer, my favorite meme is the one with the dog with the coffee cup sipping his coffee in the middle of a fire, and it just says, "I'm fine. Everything's fine.
Everything's all right."
You're showing that you're thriving in the chaos. You're trying to keep it all together through the chaos. So, yeah, those are always super relatable, especially with the millennial and the Gen Z audiences. Yeah. But Ed, when it comes to maybe some visual content that goes along with posts, let's get your feedback here, because you've been involved in photography, in videography, in graphic design, and everything in between. So do you have any guidance or input or thoughts on when you post? Should you post text and links? Should you include a video? Should you include images? How often do you need to include media along with your post content? What can you give the audience here?
Sure. Yeah, I think anytime that you can include some sort of an imagery that goes along with it, whether it's a video or a photo, it's always going to help get its attention, and people are going to notice that a little quicker than just a text blurb. But it's also important to go with what is the language that you typically communicate in. So if you're not the type of person who takes a lot of photos or video, sharing a lot of that is going to, one, not share your voice, but it's also going to seem more like a burden than the way that than you're used to doing. And I would say when it comes to photo and video, I think a lot of people get the impression, oh, I have to go buy this, cinema camera, or I need this really, nice SLR to be able to take good photos, to be able to do this. Modern cell phone cameras are kind of the point where they have such an excellent quality that a lot of times the differentiation between that and a standalone camera are imperceptible. So, if you're on a job and this is what you have on your hand, the photographer adage that everyone always gravitates to is the best camera for the job is the one that you have with you at the time. So use this thing as much as you can. And the other part I would say too is, even if you have the capability of being a video professional or visual professional, maybe it's better to actually use that iPhone or that Samsung phone or whatever your camera phone is that you have. It's better. Sometimes it's better for you to show up the way that your audience shows up online. So if your audience is used to using these devices, you having that same consistent look makes you look more like that personable level that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, that's fair. And for those of you who are a little bit nervous about creating that content on your own, whether it's taking photos or video, or editing a more polished video or photo, or adding additional media that Ed was talking about, you don't have to do that. And in fact, you can add the visual component to your post. Say if you share somebody else's post and then add your 2 cents on it, or say you paste a link into it and then it automatically populates the excerpt from that article and the visual that goes along with that for the social preview. So there are ways to add media and add images or video to your post without you having to produce it as well. So Kyle, I'm going to come back to you. This is our last question before we address some Q&A questions and start to wrap up. For a guy like me, very, very simple, somebody that if I were to get involved in social media today for a business, I would be starting from scratch. This would seem very overwhelming. How can I make this easier on myself to get started with creating my social media presence? Or for somebody who's not quite as mature in social media, how can we simplify this for them so they can mature in their presence on social media and become more active and more prevalent with their clients and with their audience?
I totally get that it can be overwhelming. I find myself overwhelmed at times myself. But really, that can be said for most new things until you become familiar with them. And I think you really have to just be intentional about committing to social media. I know I'm repeating myself here, but as busy business owners and IT pros trying to get into social media marketing, you got to allocate some time, whether that's you do it monthly or you do it weekly on like a Sunday afternoon. Create content and schedule it. If you don't prioritize that, you'll never start, or even if you start and it doesn't become part of your regular cadence, it's going to fade into the background. So scheduling ahead, ensure you're active. And then if something comes up that's spontaneous and it's worth, posting about, like I said, just pull your phone out, capture it, share your thoughts. Same thing. If you stumble upon an article that you think's worth sharing, or maybe you disagree with it, maybe you have a counter argument. That's something that you didn't necessarily generate that content, but you're adding your thoughts, you're sharing. So those are opportunities. Also, there are a lot of resources available. So there's like social media management tools, and they can be very, very robust. Some of them have free trials. Most of them are paid, but some have free trials and some have like a basic plan that they offer for free. If you're early in your social media journey, you're better off just using the native scheduling tools and the capabilities that are in those platforms. There's no sense in throwing a lot of money at this until you know that it's fully committed. Until you know that you're ready to fully commit to it, and you see that as one of your primary marketing means of marketing. And if you're not confident in your creativity or your writing skills, AI, right? AI, generative AI, things like Copilot, ChatGPT, those can help you refine your thoughts, right? I know there's a fear, of it sounding too much like a computer verdict, right? But you can put in your basic thoughts, and then AI can help you just refine it. But really, there's no right or wrong answer to any of this. Just experiment. You're going to learn as you go. And there are some, I just wanted to touch on this quickly because we added it to the resources section. There's a lot of holidays. And when I say holidays, I mean holidays, right? But there's things like National Coffee Day or IT Professionals Day, stuff like that, where it'll allow you to kind of be timely. You can participate in a hashtag and maybe show up in some conversations. There's a link to a social calendar. Just take a look at it. That again, that's something that you can just add to your Outlook or Google Calendar, and when you're doing your monthly or weekly prep, that's some ready and easy low hanging fruit to grab.
Yeah, that's a great point. And to the AI conversation, we've talked about this on previous webinars. We use some AI content development tools internally. They help to accelerate content, but you still need to go back and edit it and make it all about your business and your customers and clients. So don't always take the easy way out and just copy and paste from a Copilot or from a ChatGPT. You've always got to refine that for your own audience and your own people. So we're at the end of our time. We're actually a little bit over. We're going to stay on a little bit and answer a couple of questions. So if you do have questions, drop them in the Q&A. But for those of you who need to drop right now, thank you for attending. We're really appreciative that we have you here as an audience to get some knowledge from us, and for us, that we're able to impart that knowledge on you to make your business better. better, to make your marketing better. So thank you for attending and being part of this quarterly webinar series that we've had for the first time this year for Market Shift. This webinar, if you'd like to watch it on demand, or if you'd like to share it with one of your colleagues, it's going to be available on demand within the next 24 hours, available at the same link. We're also going to post it on demand at dnh.com/marketshift for our US partners, or dnh.ca/marketshift for our Canadian partners. We don't have any upcoming webinars scheduled for 2025 quite yet, but there will be one scheduled for the first quarter of the next calendar year. And we're considering looking at the usage of data in marketing and sales. So if you do have an idea of what you'd like to see covered in a future topic, go ahead and throw that in the Q&A widget. We would be happy to take any of your suggestions and address those in a future webinar. And then before we wrap up, I want to make sure that we have it. Oh, yes. If you do have questions following this webinar, or you'd like to meet with our marketing experts, reach out to marketshift@dnh.com, and you can schedule a meeting with me, Ed, and the rest of our team to go over any and all of your marketing needs, from our Market Shift customizable resources all the way through custom project services and consultations, where Ed, myself, and even Kyle may be involved from a social perspective. So again, thank you for attending today. We're glad that you can be here. And now we're going to jump into some questions for those that want to stick around. So our first question here is, what measures do you recommend to secure social media accounts from hacking? And I know that a lot of people have had a lot of issues with accounts being hacked, or even accounts being spoofed. So Ed and Kyle, do you guys have recommendations on how to best secure your social accounts?
I actually wanted to clarify that right out of the gate, to make sure that people are using that right terminology, because so often I'll see some of my friends will post like, oh, if you got a friend request from me, ignore it because I've been hacked. And it's like, well, you haven't been hacked. Someone has created another account that looks like you and is trying to behave like you. And yeah. I think Kyle can probably say that we've seen some of this as well from a D&H perspective. So it's in that instance, if it's a spoofing scenario, you want to handle it the same way you would whether it's a legal issue. You want to reach out with your legal team and be able to try and settle those as much as possible. But in terms of security measures from securing your account, I would say that if you're going to put people on your page to be admins or be able to be editors or other content on it, make sure that you check at that security level that you have those people at, because many of those pages do provide different ways that you can give people certain ability to do certain things. So like maybe they can suggest content, but it becomes moderated, and then you get the ability to go ahead and divvy that out as much as possible. So it's making sure you have responsible people that you want to have part of it, that are part of that customer service forward facing, and then also just making sure that you have a good email contact. And many of these platforms are now doing a 2-factor authentication so that you can secure that down even more. A lot of it's general security stuff.
That was MFA was definitely something I was going to recommend. Also, the facial recognition where you can enter that that helps. But the 2-form authentication is a must. Another thing that you can do is these platforms will allow you to you can just do it from the app on your phone, but every now and then it's good practice to log out of all devices. I think it's, even though we're talking to IT pros here, I think you'd still be surprised how many devices you're logged into, right? So what that will do is that's going to refresh the inherent security protocols, and when the next time you log in from that new device, it's going to say someone's trying to log in from whatever your town is, hopefully, right? But that refreshes that, so that if someone logs in from a different area, all of a sudden now you're getting a warning that you may have had a vulnerability, right? And then, yes, certainly people spoofing accounts, that's problematic. We've had it multiple times there are report functions that allow you to report if it's a Facebook or LinkedIn,
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. You can report them. On LinkedIn, we had before they took down a fraudulent page, we had to provide some business information, some proof, that we were who we said we were, but they eventually took the page down. So, and honestly, you may have created a page and forgotten about it. So it's check it out. Like go to your do a search for your company name, see what's out there. Sometimes it'll be an unclaimed page. But if you're trying to establish a presence, you want to get rid of anything that's dead, right? Or that's not you, but someone could confuse you. You don't want them. You don't want someone going to mention your company in this great review, and then they accidentally mention, an account that you created in 2009 and you forgot about. So it's worth going through it and doing a search on all the platforms.
Yeah, that's really good feedback, guys.
I'm dealing with that exact same situation with one of the mountain biking community websites that I'm helping with their YouTube account, where different people have come in and left their organization, and actually that's probably a really good point to piggyback on this other side of it, is that if you're starting small and maybe it's one person that's independently taken it on themselves to get something started. Mm-hmm. It's good to make sure that you're aware of that and that you're able to work with that person or be able to get, a authorized admin from within your company to be in control of the main portion of it, and then grant them access below that, because you could run into that exact same situation where we have multiple YouTube accounts and no one that was connected with the creation of those is around anymore. So we can't get rid of them. So it's, keeping track of what you have that's out there is very important.
Yeah, all great feedback, guys. Thank you. So I'm going to go to a question next from Sam. Sam says, we're focused on B2B segments, acting as a VAR, and I mostly ignore messages I get on LinkedIn. But how can I make my social media presence more effective for driving sales? And guys, I'm actually going to start out by answering this because I think this is going to tee it up for you two. So Kyle mentioned earlier that every message we get, every comment we get, try to respond to. And so there is that first thing that I would recommend doing, that we would recommend doing, is if you get messages and they're business relevant, respond, especially if they're to your business page. I know the personal pages, the personal profiles, like I have so much in mail on LinkedIn that's just cold calling through social media. I ignore or delete that. But if it's business relevant, you do want to respond to that. And in fact, I think a good example of this, and Ed and I have seen this person speak at marketing conferences before. His name's Marcus Sheridan, and I think he wrote a book on this, or he gives presentations on it. It's they ask, you answer. And so the whole story here is that Marcus owned a pool company, and anytime somebody came to a social media page and asked him a question, they would always answer, even if it meant that they were directing to a different business, or that the client wasn't a great fit for their business, or that the client was a better fit for a different business, or if it was a service they couldn't offer, they would still give the direction and say, hey, we can't do that, but this person might be able to help. And that just established the credibility and the trust. Again, going back to that trust concept that Kyle talked to us about, it helped to establish the trust with that business. And so that can actually help you with effective selling and driving sales down the line. But I think what you're trying to ask here is, how can you use social media today to sell without actually being spammy with an in-mail or those direct messages? So Kyle and Ed, do you two have any advice for Sam on how you can sell on social media without being spammy?
I can jump in first. If you've ever seen the emojis in people's names, there's a reason why people do that. And that's so they can immediately identify when someone like a bot or someone who is just doing like an autofill and just sending a mass message to people for marketing. So as soon as they, if it's someone who does a lot in the cloud, then they've got, a cloud or something like that. There is a reason there, and that's just to help them filter. So where I'm headed with this is don't send mass messages. Mm-hmm. If you have a legitimate prospect, you should show them that you've done research on their company and that you really feel like you have a good plan for them, and you can drill down as much specifics as you can. Try to predict some pain points, or maybe offer some general pain points and just say, I've worked with, other dentist offices or whatever you're specializing in. I've worked with other businesses like yours in the past, and they had these three pain points, and I was able to address them. Make it as specific and tailored to that person and their business as possible. And I think that's the best way to avoid being perceived as spam, because there's a lot of noise, right? There's a lot of noise in everyone's inboxes, especially the end mail.
Yeah, and when you're talking about selling here too, you can sell your services directly, or you can sell your business, and you can sell you as a professional. And so it's a mix of sales and marketing here. So that's something that's important, that driving sales from social media is really marketing, and making sure that when they think about a service that you offer or a technology that you offer, that they're thinking about you first. And that comes from establishing that social media presence. So that's important to understand, and just realize that you're not often going to be able to sell directly on social. However, if you're in the public sector where you have to network and you have to, mix and mingle and connect with individuals at, a K through 12 school or a government agency, that's how sales works in public sector. So you almost have to do a little bit of selling that way. But again, it's selling you as the expert and selling your business as that source of knowledge and that reliable provider at that point. So with that, we are going to wrap up. With that, we are about 17 minutes over. We really appreciate everybody sticking around to join us today. Again, this is going to be on demand in about 24 hours. So if you want to watch on demand, dnh.com/marketshift or dnh.ca/marketshift, or use the same link that you use to access today's webinar. This will be on demand perpetually, and we'll send you a follow-up email once that's on demand. And then again, for any and all your needs that are market shift related, dnh.com/marketshift, dnh.ca/marketshift, or if you'd like to reach us directly and maybe schedule a time for a consultation related to social media or any custom marketing projects, reach out to us at marketshift@dnh.com. So Kyle, Ed, thanks for joining us today. To our audience, thank you for joining us today and participating. We had a great time. We hope you have a happy holiday season, and we'll see you again in 2025.
Thanks, all.
See ya.
See ya.